corner. You're probably all very familiar at this stage with these systems anyway, but it's worth just running through it. The Q&A, raise hand and other functions are not enabled, but please feel free to offer any comments or thoughts in the chat box. And indeed, if you see somebody interesting in the list of attendees, feel free to send them a direct message. I really encourage you to use the opportunity. We'd recommend that you use the active speaker view on the top right-hand corner of your screen so that you'll just see the speaker who's speaking at the time. And finally, as many of you who know me, you'll know that I'm actively encouraging you to use Twitter to tweet your thoughts during the event, to ensure that the messages that we convey today are disseminated far and wide. The hashtag that we recommend you use today will simply be SOCENT, S-O-C-E-N-T, SOCENT. Now, so to warm us up, we'll have our first video showcase of social enterprise called We Play. We Play is a social enterprise bringing the joy and love of play as a way of life to children and their families, through online resources enabling children to become physically literate and ensuring enjoyment at the core of every experience. So we'll run that video now. Thank you.
I'm Claire McSweeney, founder of We Play. And 3 years ago, I found myself leaving behind corporate well-being and walking the path of social impact. That is, to enable every child experience the joy of physical activity, empowering them to be active for life. I knew I could use my broad experience in athletic training, exercise science, and health promotion, as well as my lived experience from being involved in sport to an elite level, to give voice to children's needs, support our under-resourced primary school teachers and PE, and all parents at home. Most of us grew up in an era of neighbourhood games and free play. But today in Ireland, the picture of childhood activity is vastly different. Less than 1 in 5 children are active enough to be healthy. Simple movements that we took for granted, such as running, jumping and throwing, are difficult for kids. As many as 1 in 4 children cannot run properly, and 1 in 2 children cannot kick a ball correctly. Think about that. Our children are struggling with physical literacy. Through my social enterprise and We Play, I'm trying to change that. It started out at grassroots, going into primary schools and supporting teachers with PE and children's physical literacy development. Working with over 1,000 children over the last few years, I came face to face with these statistics daily. I saw the struggle of children, which can be up to half the class. But the onset of COVID abruptly halted this. And so, in responding to the school's call to support children's well-being, I pivoted quickly to providing online videos and resources for PE and helping teachers. This has evolved into a scalable online offering where We Play is a digital physical literacy educational tool for children to empower them to be active for life. Its curriculum-based approach is child-centered and inclusive, integrating fun and learning. As a classroom educational tool, it supports teachers with inclusive learning in PE. And in the home, the whole family can join Coach Claire in experiencing the joy of movement and physical activity together. Empowering children to be active for life is one of the best gifts you can give a child. The availability of capital and funding is something to contend with for any startup, but particularly a social enterprise. And I was keen to develop a self-sustaining business model in the commercial sphere, rather than a reliance on the traditional way of funding or fundraising. Setting up a limited company then allowed me access to the Cork Leo supports and services, and importantly, the ability to trade internationally. Social entrepreneurship is really the intersection of business and social purpose with impact. And I believe you can build a high-growth company that's profitable, that gives exceptional value to customers, and that does good in the world. But no one goes this entrepreneurial journey alone, and WePlay would not be where it is today without the support of key organisations. And Social Impact Ireland have been absolutely central to WePlay's recent growth. Their incubator provided immeasurable value through their business development programme and through collaboration and connection of social business with mainstream business. The resources, expertise and fantastic support of Social Impact Ireland made it possible for me to pivot rapidly during COVID. Similarly, the Cork Leo office have been hugely supportive, particularly on the international trading front. It's a real example of supporting business, entrepreneurship, and championing social innovation to create real social and economic value. And now, as a participant on Enterprise Ireland's New Frontiers CIT programme, WePlay's growth is being accelerated with the support of the highly experienced Rubicon team. And so the journey continues, with growing interest from the United States that has resulted in 2 active pilots of WePlay. Indeed, COVID-19 has set the stage for a collective purpose, where entrepreneurship and the economy reconcile with greater social good, where social enterprise can help shape a post-crisis economy and build back a more resilient, socially conscious and sustainable future.
Isn't that just great? I think that was a really, really fantastic just representation of what social enterprises are all about. It's all about the innovation and the passion. And I had to note the what was referred to there as the intersection between business and social impact. Now, it's my really great pleasure to move to the next element in the agenda and to introduce our keynote speaker for today, and a real champion and believer of the power of social enterprise, Minister for Rural and Community Development, Heather Humphreys. Minister Humphreys, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. Can I just say I am delighted to welcome so many of you, albeit virtually, to the 2nd annual National Social Enterprise Conference. Now, in normal times, I've been meeting you in person in my capacity as Minister for Rural and Community Development, but unfortunately, as we all know, COVID-19 has made virtual conferences the new normal for the time being anyway. So I'm pleased to say we're meeting today on International Social Enterprise Day. So it certainly is the perfect opportunity to recognise the importance of social enterprises in our communities and to discuss ways in which government can continue to support you. The theme of today's conference is Shaping a Sustainable, Inclusive Recovery. So this is without doubt a very appropriate theme given the year that we have had and the challenges facing us in 2021. So on behalf of government, I want to begin by recognising the resilience shown by the social enterprise community since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, you have proven your value and your dedication to the communities in which you serve and work. And many of you have had to physically close your doors like so many other businesses. Many also remained open and accessible when it came to your customers and your communities. You had to diversify and make decisions you never thought you would have to make. So I really do want to commend you for your hard work and your commitment. And I know that many of you adapted to the needs of your local areas as part of your contribution to the community cause. For example, I'm told Food Cloud worked with over 600 communities in order to meet additional demand for food hampers during COVID. In County Mayo, I understand Ballina Costume Company recruited 50 volunteer machinists to produce PPE equipment for the HSE. And I'd also like to mention Speedpack Contract Packing in Coolock in Dublin, who are providing logistical support for other social enterprises such as Grow It Yourself in Waterford, and are also active in both the production and indeed the supply of PPE. These are just some real life examples of the value, hard work and innovation shown in abundance by our social enterprises during this pandemic. And I was delighted that my department was able to support the work of social enterprise during COVID-19 through the likes of the 35 million COVID-19 Stability Fund, the €5 million commitment to the Innovate Together Philanthropy Fund, and the 2.5 million COVID-19 Emergency Fund, which supported community and voluntary groups, including social enterprises. I'm a person who believes the glass is always half full. So as we look towards 2021, we can do so with a degree of optimism, particularly given the recent developments surrounding vaccines. So 2021 most certainly will be the year of the recovery. A recovery, of course, from the devastating impact that this pandemic has left. But it's also a recovery that must focus not just on our economy, but on our society and our environment too. And I know our social enterprises will not only be part of that recovery, but you will be significant drivers of it also. I want to welcome John Evoy, General Manager of Grow Remote, who I know will be in conversation with William Parnell later. And I think John will agree that COVID has actually thrown up a significant opportunity in terms of remote working, or as I call it, connected working. As my department officials know all too well, I am passionate about grasping this concept, which has now become a reality for so many people. As many of you know, the Secretary General of my department, Kevin McCarthy, is the chair of the interdepartmental working group tasked specifically with bringing together the national network of remote working facilities. So in the coming weeks, I'll also be publishing a national strategy for rural Ireland, which will have a focus on tapping into the potential of connected working. Connected working is reducing commutes for many workers, providing increased custom for the local businesses in rural towns, and it's even attracting people to move back to areas that they grew up in. So the opportunities are there, and it's up to all of us to grasp them. Returning to today's theme, you'll be aware that the National Social Enterprise Policy 2019 to 2022 was the first of its kind in this country. Its publication was a watershed moment for the sector. It's a policy that seeks to grow social enterprises in terms of scale and impact. And I can assure you that despite the pandemic, substantial progress continues to be made behind the scenes on the implementation of the National Social Enterprise Policy, and I will touch on some of that progress now. You'll be aware that the policy has three main objectives: building awareness of social enterprise, growing and strengthening social enterprise, and achieving better policy alignment. Regarding the first objective, building awareness of social enterprise, our aim is to raise the profile of social enterprise in Ireland and to increase understanding of its contribution and its potential. Because without understanding, we will never realise the full potential of social enterprise. And that is why we are developing a social enterprise awareness raising strategy, which is nearing completion. We all have a role to play in raising awareness, and I want to challenge you to think about how you all can support this effort. In relation to the second policy objective, growing and strengthening social enterprise, that's where the government and my department come in. We are investing significant resources annually in social enterprises through the likes of the Community Services Programme, SICAP, LEADER, the Social Enterprise Development Fund, and the Dormant Account funding. Our training and mentoring scheme is supporting 14 programmes throughout the country to enhance the capacities of more than 400 social enterprises. Our small capital grant scheme provides capital grants worth a total of €2 million to 230 social enterprises. And in the near future, I'll be launching a new regeneration scheme to further enhance the capacities of social enterprises. Finally, objective number 3 is achieving better policy alignment. To help understand the deeper impact of social enterprise in Ireland, my department, in partnership with the Irish Research Council, launched a 2-year postdoctoral research fellowship on social enterprise. And I know that a legal form guide is to be launched at this conference following consultation between my department and Trust Law. Additionally, on the education front, we are working on an exciting collaboration with Broiga, which will soon be announced. As well as that, a research study in partnership with Rethink Ireland is now underway to determine if there are specific challenges facing social enterprise relating to legal status. Separately, Ireland's social finance leaders, Clan Credo and Community Finance Ireland, via the Social Finance Foundation, have benefited from a new EU guarantee scheme to provide better access to finance. And we have also developed an all-island partnership on social enterprise, which I believe has huge potential. So, as you clearly see, there is a lot of work going on to achieve the objectives laid down in our social enterprise policy. And I do really believe that COVID-19 has shown us that we can operate in a better, more sustainable and a more imaginative way. And although next year will be the year of the recovery, I see no reason why we can't use 2021 as an opportunity to do things differently. And that's where you, our social entrepreneurs, will step up to the plate. This time last year, my predecessor, Michael Ring, TD, stood here and declared an ambition to make Ireland a global leader in social enterprise. So I just want to reiterate that today. And some of you probably know that my background is in the credit union movement. And I left the profit-driven world of banking into the credit union world of finance, not for profit, but for service, was our motto. Of course, the credit union is another great social enterprise, so I can assure you that I fully appreciate the benefits of social enterprise, and I'm committed to supporting it and to expanding it. So I'm delighted to open today's conference. I look forward to meeting many of you face to face in the not too distant future. So thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for those really inspiring remarks and very detailed overview of our progress in the past year. I think we all appreciate as well you framing the future as an opportunity to do things differently and to do so via a social enterprise. I'll move on to our next session now, and our next session will be a conversation between the department's Assistant Secretary General William Parnell with someone who is very well known in the social enterprise sector in Ireland, John Evoy. William has been leading the charge on social enterprise at a strategic level for very many years, and we have him to thank for much of the government's progress on social enterprise in recent years. I'll leave it to William, I think, to introduce John more fully. So, William, without further ado, over to you.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. So, as Andrew said, my guest this morning is John Evoy, who is well known to many of you in the social enterprise sector. I think John will be, I'm not quite sure if John is on screen or will be on screen, but we'll plow ahead anyway. So John is a multiple award-winning social entrepreneur and practitioner, and he won an Irish Person of the Year award in 2015 for his work in founding the Irish Men's Shed movement. It's just one of many different initiatives that John has been involved in. John is currently the General Manager of Grow Remote, a social enterprise that champions remote working to enable people to work and live locally. And for the previous 3 years, John was manager of the Social Enterprise Development Fund at Rethink Ireland. And he's currently also a member of the implementation group, which oversees the delivery of Ireland's national social enterprise policy. So I might just check that John is okay.
Yeah, I can hear you, William.
Great stuff, John. So, John, as I said, you've been working in the social enterprise space for quite some time. And what changes have you seen in the landscape for social enterprises over the last 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, William. And I just want to thank the Minister and Andrew as well for their introductions. So there's been a lot of changes, William, and I suppose it was nice to be able to reflect on those as we prepared for this conference. I think social enterprises, like the awareness around social enterprises, the impact of social enterprises, And pretty much all facets of social enterprise have improved and grown in the length of time that I've been involved. I think the language has changed around it, and the people are starting to get a real deep understanding of what social enterprises are and how they can contribute to Ireland and to our society and to our economy.
Right. And John, do you think that for social enterprises, is it becoming a little bit easier for them to be able to source support, whether that's financial support or social support? Has that awareness change that you mentioned helped in that regard, or have we still some way to go there?
So I think so. I suppose I've had a fairly unique position of being at the two sides of that table, where I was both seeking funding on thousands of occasions probably, but also managing a fund. So I think the answer to this question will depend totally on who you're talking to. So anybody who's looking for funding and is finding it hard to get it will say no. But in my experience, there is lots more opportunities as well. I think that it's grown really substantially. Maybe we could look at it on two levels. It's like at local level, I think the local enterprise offices, but also the local development companies have really stepped up in their support to social enterprises in the last couple of years. And I think that's really, really important and really significant. And then at national level as well, I know that particularly the CSP is a really big investment in social enterprises. But I think there's a lot more support and funding out there for more of the high potential startup social enterprises. My old group of friends at Rethink Ireland in particular, but also Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, ChangeX, and many other organisations seem to have similar missions that are really transforming the landscape. I suppose what we find is if somebody's got an idea, is setting out on the journey as a social entrepreneur, the supports are there. It takes a little bit of digging to find out where to go and lots of conversations, but that's why I think mornings like this morning are so important, that people get to meet each other and network. I know it's not quite the same when we're doing it digitally, because people mightn't be having that coffee during the break and things. But really, I think the answers that people have questions that are out there, and it's just you need to dig and find those answers.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things the social enterprise policy is hoping to do is to make it easier to find those solutions, John. I think as well that the awareness strategy that Minister Humphreys spoke about will hopefully help people to understand the nature of social enterprises. In fact, John, you mentioned high potential startups, and perhaps we're seeing one there with We Play and Claire's video presentation. It's really encouraging to see that she has received support from the Leo and Cork, and indeed Enterprise Ireland under the New Frontiers programme. So tremendous success story there. But of course, we should also recall that there's a whole spectrum of social enterprises, and some of them are just working very, very hard within their own community. And particularly, I think we've seen that in the context of COVID. So what challenges, John, do you see ahead, and indeed opportunities for social enterprises as we start to learn to live with COVID, or indeed as we emerge from COVID over the coming year?
So I think COVID is obviously all the phrases we're so used to at this point, like unprecedented challenges, etc. But they really have been. And so when COVID hit first, I was still with the SED Fund at Rethink, and I had a role there in supporting a cohort of social enterprise, and we were really worried about them. And I think it was very timely that the government came out with the support, such as the wage subsidy scheme, because I think that was the lifeline that lots of organisations needed when that first experience of COVID and lockdown happened. I think without that, the sector would have been in serious trouble, because it took some time to adjust to the challenges, and they've adjusted amazingly. And really, I think, seeing this challenge as an opportunity, in many social enterprises, like the Minister mentioned, have overperformed and upped their game. But just back to the start of the pandemic, I think there was a risk where because there's quite a cohort of really innovative social enterprises in Ireland that might be still relatively early stage. So if they had not been able to survive the pandemic, which they mightn't have had without the government support, such as like those innovative ideas, and I'm thinking of one in particular that we know quite well in Refill Ireland, for example. So their main they work with events and try to reduce the number of single-use plastic bottles. So during COVID, they had no place to do that work. But if COVID had stopped that from happening, like that brilliant idea might have been lost to Ireland. And thank God it wasn't, and I think there's hundreds of other ideas like that out there. So, and then I suppose as the pandemic continued and we started to kind of see that this is here for the longer term and people adjusted, social enterprises have adjusted amazingly. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about our own organisation in Grow Remote in a minute or two, but like for us, it has completely accelerated a vision that we would have had, where people get to live and work and participate wherever they want to in the country, regardless of where, maybe an office is. And I think that can just bring enormous sustainability to hundreds of towns and villages, both economically and socially.
Yeah. As you're talking about Go Remote, do you want to say a little bit more about it? I know you're relatively recently appointed there as general manager, so you obviously saw something very attractive in the potential of this organisation. So for those people that are listening in, maybe say a little bit about Go Remote and its objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it's only a couple of months ago I was Rethink Ireland doing a job that I loved, and in a space where I felt that it was quite unique to have the kind of impact I was able to have on the sector or contribute to many great organisations. So when the opportunity for Grow Remote is probably the only thing that could have pulled me away from that. I know the said fund is now in the safe hands of Ellie O'Sullivan and Owen Ryan, so it's fine. But the potential I saw in Grow Remote, which the founders and Tracy and Rose and many others had done amazing work before I ever got involved. I just think the potential is absolutely transformative for the country. We all know that there's an issue around the urbanisation, that small towns and villages and communities are dying. The main street in many small towns has got loads of boarded up shop fronts, for example. And I think remote working is a solution to that. There's opportunity for tens of thousands of people to live and work wherever they want across the country, maybe reducing community, which gives them time back that they can use volunteering locally or spending with their families. We also know that the research shows for every 2 or 3 jobs that come to a community, it sustains another job locally. So that might be the difference in keeping a post office open or keeping an extra teacher in a school in one of the islands off the west coast. So I think in a vision that we could share for Ireland for the future, remote working or connected working, as the Minister named it earlier, is just an essential part of that vision.
Okay. Yeah. And John, as the Minister mentioned, she is quite passionate about it and would share your vision as to how it can transform rural Ireland. So we will be working with you and with Tracy and others in Grow Remote as we develop our remote working infrastructure, because again, I think it's very important that there is a good infrastructure where people can go and work and have all the important office equipment and facilities that are available. But maybe just to go back for a moment to the policy, the Minister gave a brief overview of some of the key developments that have taken place under the social enterprise policy. But for somebody who's very, very close to social enterprises on the ground, are you seeing the policy actually having an impact on social enterprises on the ground? You've mentioned capital grants that we've provided funding for. Are you seeing the policy helping in any other ways?
Yeah, I have, for sure. I think the last few years, I think the publication of the policy out in SpeedPack just over a year ago, which seems like a lifetime now because of COVID, was a really important milestone. But I think it's been part of a longer process, obviously the preparation of that policy, the consultation that preceded it, the work of the Social Enterprise Task Force, going back for about 10 years, has all kind of led to this point where there's now like a big momentum behind social enterprises. I think having the policy is really important. I think that like it formalizes all the energy and the passion that can go into, you know, transforming the ecosystem into one of the best ecosystems for social enterprises in the world. And I think that's happening. I mean, sometimes it's quite hard to identify. Once you're so deep in the middle of something, it's hard to know how if people outside of it.
Can everyone see chat, do you think?
Somebody else speaking there. So I think it's hard to see what's going on. You know, if you're so deep inside of something, like what's that like for others? You know, is there a greater awareness around social enterprise that you never heard about it before? But I think there are. I think there's been countless courses, maybe you know, in third level colleges that now include social enterprise modules, for example. It's becoming a real option. One thing I'd love to see would be like, so, you know, maybe showing the age now, but when we were growing up in the RAS, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, it was the typical, very few options. Like, it was a teacher or an astronaut for the ambitious ones. And but wouldn't it be great if kids are saying, you know, they want to run a social enterprise? And I think that means we need to get awareness, of which I know there's a subgroup of the implementation group working on awareness, that like right through schools, second level, third level, and through communities. And I think that's happening. You know, and I think, you know, it's the ambition as well as social enterprises can grow. So, like, I was just thinking, for example, one of the co-funders with yourselves of the Social Enterprise Development Fund, IPV Insurance, like, they're a CLG, but they're worth over €1 billion, and they do all this good work for the country. Like, so why can't other CLGs or social enterprises, social missions, grow that big and transform Ireland? I know they've had 100 years or something head start, but we can catch up. So, like, you know, that people talk about unicorn startups in the for-profit world. Let's have our own version. Mightn't quite be a unicorn, but something. Let's talk about €1 million businesses and like really high talent who we can attract and retain. I think social enterprises, have a very bright future.
Yeah. And John, I was going to ask you about your ambitions for social enterprise, and I think you've been touching on it there. You know, I suppose social enterprise might become a sector that's really mainstreamed in terms of education and looking to have the ambition to be successful not just nationally but perhaps internationally. Are there any other ambitions that you would have for social enterprise in the coming years?
Yeah, I suppose there's some key ones that tie in neatly to the like mission of Grow Remote as well, around employment and creating employment right across the country. I think social enterprises can be a great driver of that. I think as well we know you know, from the previous recession and again during this crisis that the jobs that are created in social enterprises are really resilient jobs. You don't hear too often about layoffs in social enterprises, like, for example, that you might in other sectors of the economy during a recession. And that's really important. I know for example, there's out in Darndale, Belcamp Village Centre, who I got to know quite well. Like, they've came through two really important crises, and their number one mission was not to let anybody off, because they were there for the community, part of the community. They weren't an organisation that came in. And I think social enterprises bring that ethos, and that's really transformative as well. And particularly then, if you map that with remote working, where people don't have to commute and they've got extra time to volunteer in their community or spend with their families or whatever, like, we can really have a really lovely country to live in. The other part of it then, I suppose, that like needs to plug into that is like the quality of the jobs. You know, that people don't see social enterprises just as entry-level jobs, that they can have, you know, opportunities to progress in a career, you know, get to top of organisations that do trade internationally, that are really exciting and really innovative, because that's the stuff that you know, retains the top talent.
Great stuff, John. I'm just keeping an eye on time, but maybe just a last question, because you've spoken about you know, the quality jobs that social enterprises can bring about. You've spoken about the resilience. Do you think, though, that going forward, do social enterprises need to do anything different at all to increase their resilience, change their business models in any way to improve efficiencies, or do you see potential for more business-to-business contracts? Sometimes there's a lot of emphasis on public procurement, but actually the private sector procurement market is even larger. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on those.
So, yeah, I'd have quite a lot of thoughts. I think there's conversations going on. I'm not sure if it's your department or one of the other departments about including a social value clause in procurement. I think that would be brilliant. You know, so if we don't have to be, we have to be equally as good as any bid from the private sector. But if we're equally as good, then consideration is given to like that by giving the tender or the order to social enterprise. It brings extra value to Ireland, and I think that's something that's really important to acknowledge. In terms of business models, yeah, one thing that we've heard a lot of is, or a mantra we have in some social enterprises, the scalable ones, is that not to build poverty into the business model. So people often come to social enterprises on a social mission that they're very passionate about. Maybe they've had personal experience. So, you know, you could be working with a group of people who might be disadvantaged. And it's really hard, for example, you know, that you want to give them the service for free all the time. But there's no business in that. So it's like, and so then that might lead to a business model where somebody else pays, for example, you know, but we find that people have to build, you know, a surplus into the business model, you know, have to have reserves, have to be able to, you know, maybe build up some reserves to take risks on the next hire, you know, and things like that to, you know, develop a growth mindset for the organisation. Those are challenges. They all have to be done prudently as well. Can't be reckless. But I think there's a combination of like a growth mindset from the business perspective, while not losing that like the heart and soul that I suppose many people come to the sector with.
Thanks very much, John. I'm really struck by the comment, that phrase that you used, don't build poverty into your business model. I think that's a very, very key and an important message for social enterprises to remember. And as I always say, social enterprises shouldn't be afraid to say that they are businesses, because that's what will open the doors for them, whether it's in terms of finding support from the state sector or indeed getting contracts within the private sector. So I think there's some really important messages there. So John, our time is just up now, so I want to thank you very much for joining me for this conversation this morning. It's great to have somebody who's as experienced as you are in the whole social enterprise sphere, and we wish you very well now as you head into your new venture with Grow Remote, and we will be in contact with you as you work through that whole agenda of remote working and transforming communities across Ireland. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, William. It's been my pleasure.
Great stuff. And I'll hand back over now to Andrew.
Great. William, John, thanks a million for that. That was just a fantastic, uplifting, very rich conversation. I mean, we could listen to you all day. A lot of things struck me from that. I think the first thing we have to say is that, John, I agree with you about, you know, recognising and hopefully that social enterprise has a bright future, while recognising that there are very serious challenges and we're not trying to diminish them at all. And I also take the point you make, John, about, you know, us needing to be agile in terms of the supports that we're giving and we're making available to social enterprises, that we're listening to needs. And I say that from the point of view of the state. But I agree with William around the point of, it really resonated when you said don't build poverty into the business model. Very important, and ensuring the quality of the offering is actually there. And of course, your very clear ambitions for the future of social enterprises, that the future doesn't need to necessarily look like needs to look like the past, but just build on that good experience. Now, believe it or not, we're very much bang on time here, I think, in relation to just that session. But what we have next on the agenda is our next video showcase of another social enterprise. And this time we have the social enterprise My Mind. My Mind is a model of mental health care with community-based mental health services that work towards giving every person in Ireland equal access to mental health support, early, affordably, directly, and without stigma or delay. So, John, over to you to play that for everyone. Thank you.
My name is Christian Fickert, and I'm a clinical psychologist by background. I'm currently CEO of My Mind Center for Mental Wellbeing. My Mind is a social enterprise, and we're providing accessible and affordable mental health services in Ireland, providing counseling and psychotherapy in 15 different languages and through a network of over 100 mental health professionals, and that counselors, psychotherapists, psychologists. We have 5 physical locations across Ireland. And 3 of the locations are based in Dublin. So we have Dublin 6, Dublin 1 and Dublin 8. And we have 2 other locations in Cork and Limerick. The need is enormous, and the current access to mental health services is quite limited. So then it leaves majority of the people without any access. So we're trying to fill this gap, and we're providing affordable and accessible counseling and psychotherapy in the communities for everyone in Ireland. So basically we charge low fees to our clients. So our lowest fee is 20 euros, and we charge 20 euros mainly for unemployed clients or full-time students. Then we charge 30 euros for someone who is in part-time employment. And our standard fee is 50 euros, so still very, very affordable, and that's where our core income is coming from. My Mind was established back in 2006, so we are already 14 years in operation. So during this period, we received enormous support from various organizations, and I'm very grateful to all these partners, for example, Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, Rethink, and Ashoka, and of course we work very, very closely with public health services, and of course we receive support from HSE as well. And recently, because of the COVID situation, we established a very strong connection, very strong partnership with the Department of Health. And on behalf of the Sloan Care and POBO, we provide free online counseling sessions to anyone who's affected by COVID-19 in Ireland. Initially, when the first lockdown happened, and everyone was a little bit in shock, and in shock as well on the change of the modality in counseling and psychotherapy, we saw initial drop in March and April. We saw after this June, July, August, huge increase, and that was even up to 50% increase of our appointments from last year. As we speak today, this is beginning of the month, 10th of November, and we have already 3,200 appointments booked just for this month. So we aiming to close this month with over 4,000, at least over 4,000 appointments. What we can see at the moment is huge increase of the demand and huge increase of mental health issues across various communities, and especially increase of anxiety issues. And we think that with easy access and quick access to counseling and psychotherapy, everyone is able to rebuild the coping skills much faster. What we could also realize through the COVID-19 was that clients and mental professionals are now more open towards online counseling and psychotherapy. So through online, through video counseling sessions or phone counseling sessions, we can access more people. So we believe that My Mind will be playing very crucial role in 2021 and beyond 2021, post-COVID, in sustainable and inclusive recovery for many people in Ireland.
Thank you, Christian, for that really very useful insight into the important work you're doing. And I think a very important point that was made there by Christian was just around the financial hybridity of his social enterprise, where there is traded income, but there's also commissioned services for the state, which is something that many social enterprises in this sector are also pursuing. But with well-being in mind, we're going to take a very short leg stretching break for everybody. We're going to just take 5 minutes, all right? You can pop the kettle on, have a cup of tea, walk around the room, whatever you need to do. But I would ask everyone to be back here in front of the screen at 5 to 11. In the meantime, I'm very happy to say that we have engaged Musicantia to provide the musical interlude for this break. Musicantia is a Roma cultural and advocacy project and social enterprise which runs a music school for Roma in Dublin. They work to promote the human rights of Roma population and their integration into Ireland. We very much hope you enjoy the music. So we'll see you back at 5 to 11 in 5 minutes' time. Thanks very much, everybody. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope that you had a good break, just a short break, and feel a bit refreshed and enjoyed the lovely music from Musicantia, who are just a fantastically talented group and social enterprise, and we're thrilled to have them part of today's proceedings. For our next session, we're going to turn to the international perspective, which of course is extremely important to us and very strongly referenced in the National Social Enterprise Policy. As you'll know, the Irish government considers Ireland is an island at the centre of the world. We cherish our international collaborations, both to learn and to share our learnings. It's my pleasure, therefore, to introduce our next speaker, who is Antonella Noya, the Head of Social Economy and Innovation at the OECD. Antonella has more than 20 years' experience at the OECD, designing and coordinating the work on social economy, social entrepreneurship and social innovation, and has authored numerous publications in these fields. Antonella is currently coordinating a number of programs at the European Commission in the field of social entrepreneurship and social economy, including some dedicated ones on social impact measurement for social enterprises and social economy organizations, and on legal frameworks for these entities, all of which is very obviously topical and relevant to the Irish context as well. Antonella sits on various international and national committees and advisory boards, including the French National Advisory Board on Social Impact Investing, and she represents the OECD at the United Nations Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy, and on the European Commission's Group of Experts on Social Economy and Social Enterprises. Antonella, I'm really thrilled to have you here. You're a very good friend of Ireland and of this department, and I'm delighted to give you the floor now to deliver your remarks. Thank you very much, Antonella. Antonella, I think you might be still on mute. Apologies to interrupt you, but I can't hear you clearly, so maybe you're still on mute. No. Maybe, John, you might be able to help us with this on the technical side.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now loud and clear, Antonella.
Okay, so it was the problem of the headset. I hope that there will be no noise around.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Let's hope. I was saying that I am very happy to be here with you at your important conference. And I think that it is not an hazard that you decided to have it today, because as you know, today is the Social Enterprise Day. So happy birthday, social enterprises, and many happy years to come. So, as you know, the OECD role is to assist governments in shaping and implementing their policies in many policy areas, and we have done a huge amount of work for the last 25 years to help government in this endeavor. I would like to start my speech by delivering what the OECD believes is a very important message. Taking the social economy area and especially social enterprises from mainstream, from the margins to mainstream, is vital for a strong recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. So this is the right moment in time to do so, and the crisis obviously is threatening all the world and all the economy and society, but may present also an opportunity for social enterprises to strengthen their role. So why it is the right moment to take social enterprises from the margin to the mainstream? I would say for two main reasons. First of all, because clearly the COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerability of individuals, society, economy, communities, and it calls for a rethink of how the economy and society is organized. This crisis really calls for strong global responses and new solutions that are based on solidarity, cooperation, and responsibility. And I believe that these are exactly the values and practices that social enterprises adopt all over the world. Second reason is that COVID-19 has also increased the visibility of social enterprises and its contribution to social and economic development. I want to say, nevertheless, that of course the important role of social enterprises in addressing economic and social challenges existed the crisis, of course. What the crisis has done is to really shed light on the fact that social enterprises have two essential elements in terms of capacity that I would like to present here. And these are the capacity to fix and repair what are usually referred as the failure of the market and the state. So in doing that, social enterprises can really be trustable partners of public government because they complement the public action. So they do not replace, obviously, the states and regions. They do not replace the public action, but they complement it, and they need, in fact, policy support from the states. And also, the COVID-19 crisis has also shed the light on the capacity of social enterprises to inspire and transform the economy and society. And how they do so? They do so by experimenting and adopting innovative solutions, special business models, and also innovative ways to organize economic activity. And all these results in that kind of responsible practices, which are important, and I was listening to what was said just before. It is true that social enterprises need to present themselves as business and do not need to embed poverty in this, because they have a lot of assets that make them special kind of business which can have a multiple set of impacts: economic impact, social impact, environmental impact, and a strong impact on individual lives. So this capacity of transforming the economy and the society, for me, is very visible also in what is happening nowadays in many countries. We see the emergence of the so-called impact economy or purpose economy, or this social purpose business, which, although being different from social enterprises, tend to adopt more responsible practices and business model based on social economy, organization, and social enterprises. So I think this is a very important also mission that social enterprises will have to pursue in the recovery phases. But why social enterprises are, let's say, well equipped to perform these two main roles of fixing and repairing and transforming? First of all, because they put people at the center of their action, of their mission, and they think beyond profit. Of course, profits are important and needed to remain viable and sustainable on the market, but they are not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is having a social impact to improve individuals and communities' life. Second, social enterprises are really about empowering people and communities to resist and to adapt to shock. And this has well been demonstrated, not only during this crisis, but also during the previous crisis, the financial crisis. All this means that social enterprises can help resilience, and we have data shows that they were more resilient during the previous during the previous crisis, and this one, because they tended as much as they could to maintain employment and jobs rather than to dismiss it. And of course, there is another important factor that explains this capacity of social enterprises to perform this function is that they have strong local roots. They are really, they operate mainly locally, although they can operate also at national and sometimes even at global level. And their proximity to the local level really enable them to identify the needs and often to provide solution really tailored to this need. And the fact of being locally rooted is also important because they tend to work in partnership with local actors. And by doing so, they leverage this collective brain that can sometimes, and one can say even often, result in social innovation. So they are well equipped because they have the goal to address social people needs, because they operate at local level in many, many sectors. I think it is important also to shift the people understanding that social enterprises are just a niche addressing just hard to reach people needs. This is true, but we see them operating in many, many sectors: culture, tourism, renewable energies. So this is to say that really, although maybe in terms of numbers, social enterprises represent still a niche, they are growing, and there is a lot more that they can do. And this is what we observe, in fact, at the OECD. We are currently doing studies in 10 countries in Europe: Belgium, Denmark, France, Luxembourg, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain. And we know that there are more than 266,000 social enterprises, and they account for almost 4 million paid jobs. So still limited, but important, and with a huge potential to grow. Of course, nothing is rosy, and we need to acknowledge that social enterprises have been also heavily impacted by the crisis, the COVID crisis, as many other small businesses. And we are aware of difficult situation for many social enterprises in many countries, resulting in problem of cash flows and loss of revenues. And I think that this was well taken into account by the recovery packages that many countries, including Ireland, have released to support social enterprises during the current crisis, but also to help them to consolidate, to prepare for the post-COVID crisis, for the recovery. And if you are interested in this measure, we have released a note on social enterprise, social economy, and COVID-19 at the OECD that I can share with the organizer after for dissemination if you want. And of course, if policymakers have taken in account the need of social enterprises in their recovery packages, this means that they appreciate the importance of social enterprises, including in the recovery phase. Of course, there is more to do, and what public policies and policymakers could do is first strengthen and foster partnerships with social enterprises at national and local level to maintain a social enterprise as partner for the public action. I think it is very important that during this recovery period, social enterprises are invited to the decision tables to start thinking together how to build back better. Second, there is an important role of policymakers, of course, to continue to improve the policy ecosystem for social enterprises to strive and develop. And the third element, obviously, to reinforce the capacity of social enterprises in experimenting and scaling innovative ways to organize their economic activities, which links to the fact that by doing this, they can really inspire other actors to adopt more responsible practices. So as Andrew was mentioning before, OECD is developing a number of projects with many countries. We are currently, I will just mention one, we are currently developing with the financial support of the European Commission and a global action to support social and solidarity economy ecosystems, in which, of course, we also analyze social enterprises, and it targets all European countries plus Brazil, India, Mexico, Korea, United States, and Canada. And the idea is, and we have been receiving a number of requests also to look at the role of social enterprises in the post-COVID period. So I would like to conclude my intervention by reminding you, I'm sure you are already aware of this, that starting from today, so the Social Enterprise Day, till the 21st of November, there is a gathering of young economists, thought leaders, social enterprise entrepreneurs around in an event which is sponsored by the Pope, which is called the Economies of Francisco, in which these leaders are really thinking at how concretely we can build back by using more responsible business. And I will conclude with a sentence which is not from me, but again from the Pope in his latest encyclical letter, Tutti Fratelli, All Brothers, in which he says, anyone who thinks that the only lessons to be learned was the need to improve what we were already doing or to refine existing system and regulation is denying reality. Thank you very much.
Antonella, thank you so much for that. That really important and inspiring contribution, which I think underscores a lot of different points, but certainly the importance of social enterprise internationally, that this is really a truly global movement and an opportunity being recognized explicitly by the OECD, the EU and others. I fully agree with your point that you made about the importance of moving it from the margins to the mainstream and recognizing indeed that there's significant room for growth. I think also the way you conceptualized or you articulated the value proposition that social enterprises can be involved in the fixing and repairing of society and the economy. I think that's a really helpful contribution. So thank you very much, Antonella. We're delighted to be enhancing our cooperation with the OECD in this field, and we intend certainly to deepen that further, and also on the other side with the European Commission in the context of the EU Action Plan next year. We intend to share the Irish social enterprise experience and also benefit from that new process. So thanks again, Antonella. I very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Now, we'll bring things now back again to the to the national level for the next element of our discussion. One of the 26 commitments in the National Social Enterprise Policy was to look into the issue of legal status around social enterprises. And over the past year, Trust Law Thomson Reuters Foundation has been engaged in efforts and in contact with the department to develop a legal form guide for social enterprises, recognizing that very first step is often a very difficult one to take in terms of which legal form to choose and what the implications may be, not just immediately, but also a little bit down the line. CLG, plus minus charitable status, DAC, cooperative, etc., etc. So Trust Law has very kindly prepared a new legal form guide, which was going to be launched this morning by Sarah Farrelly, who's again another very good friend of the department, and she's a senior legal manager at Trust Law. Trust Law, the Thomson Reuters Foundation is the Thomson Reuters Foundation's global pro bono legal service, and Sarah works very closely with Trust Law's network of charities, non-profit organisations, and social enterprises to discuss their legal needs before connecting them with pro bono lawyers and free legal advice. And I think that's an important point for this morning as well, because some people on this call may not necessarily be aware of the service that's available. Prior to joining Trust Law, Sarah worked in a combination of global and local pro bono clearinghouse, commercial law firm, in-house legal team, Irish Human Rights Commission, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and the UN Refugee Agency. So I think with that, I'm going to hand the floor directly over to Sarah Farrelly to launch the new Social Enterprise Legal Form Guide. Sarah.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Farrelly and I'm a Senior Legal Manager with Trust Law, the global pro bono legal service of the Thomson Reuters Foundation. For those of you who may not know us, the Foundation is the charitable arm of Thomson Reuters, the global news and information service. The Thomson Reuters Foundation focuses on 3 core focus areas: media freedom, inclusive economies, and human rights. We deliver the work on these 3 focus areas through our 4 core services, which include an editorial team of journalists, a media development team, which work on training journalists around the world, a convening authority, which brings together conferences and working groups around the world, and also Trust Law, our global pro bono legal service. Trust Law has turned 10 years old this year. We've been around for a decade, and what we've been doing is connecting charities, non-profits and social enterprises on the ground in their local countries with pro bono lawyers so that they can get free legal advice and assistance. Our network has grown to become the largest pro bono legal network in the world. We now have over 6,000 members, which includes 5,000 non-profit, charity and social enterprise members, and 1,000 legal members, which is made up of law firms and in-house legal teams. What we do on a daily basis is connect these non-profits, charities and social enterprises with the lawyers to get pro bono free legal advice and assistance. Trust Law is an entirely free network to be a part of, so if there are any social enterprises, charities or non-profits listening, do feel free to get in touch and hear more about our pro bono legal service. The types of pro bono work that you can get through Trust Law mainly divide into two types of assistance. On the one hand, we've got legal advice. So this is all types of advisory projects. Whether you're a social enterprise starting out and you want to get some strong template employment contracts, for example, we can connect you with a local law firm here in Ireland who can help you develop a strong template which you can use and adapt going forward. Likewise, if your organisation has created something really innovative and you might want to get a bit of intellectual property advice to ensure that your invention or your resources or materials are properly protected, we can connect you with some IP lawyers here in Ireland who can also give you a bit of help for free. And lastly, there's lots of other types of legal issues like contract, data protection, finance related issues, and we're able to give you assistance on any of those types of matters. So do get in touch and we can discuss those together. The other main type of legal help that you can get through Trust Law is legal research. So if you're a social enterprise, for example, working on homelessness, and you actually want to look into the way that other jurisdictions approach matters relating to housing, for example, or voting rights relating to homeless people, you might want to look at a comparative legal research request, which looks at the laws across 5 different jurisdictions, for example. You can come to Trust Law and discuss those legal issues with us, and we'll be able to develop out an interesting legal research project and connect you with legal teams all over the world to compare those laws so that perhaps your organisation might want to use it for advocacy or lobbying or whatever internal purposes you might need. So that's another type of legal research we're able to facilitate, and the types of legal research we've done over the years have varied massively in topic ranges from women's rights to refugee rights to domestic violence, really dependent on what type of subject matter our organisations are working on. As part of the work of the Thomson Reuters Foundation in relation to inclusive economies, Trust Law has been working closely with social enterprises for over 10 years now. We work with over 1,000 social enterprise members across 80 countries. And first and foremost, we give them pro bono legal advice and assistance. So whether that's on their advisory, employment law or IP projects, or on bigger legal research projects, and we have been doing that for over a decade now. We also organise what we call legal health check workshops, which are free and again organised in your local jurisdiction, partnering with a law firm. And during that event, Trust Law and the law firm will take you through some high-level legal issues that your social enterprise might want to think about. And as a follow-up, we'll be able to connect you with that law firm to get tailored legal advice for your particular organisation. Trust Law also runs social enterprise training for lawyers so that they're able to be aware of oftentimes the quite considered factors that they need to take into consideration when they are advising social enterprises. And lastly, Trust Law is really proud of the Legal Structuring Guide series that we've been developing. We are at 15 now, and we have just today published the Legal Structuring Guide for Ireland. So this series of legal structuring guides has been developed and produced in countries and regions all over the world, and it looks at the legal structures that are available in any particular jurisdiction for social enterprises. Some vary in certain jurisdictions, like the UK, for example. There might be specific legal structures available for social enterprises. And then in other countries, there may not, but it's providing them, social enterprises, with information on the types of legal structures they can establish as and the advantages and disadvantages with each of the particular types of entities. We're really proud at Trust Law to today be launching the Legal Structuring Guide for Social Enterprises in Ireland. So before I go into a bit of detail about the Legal Structuring Guide, which we have just launched in Ireland, I wanted to just touch on some of Trust Law's work to date in Ireland. So we've hosted a number of thematic panel events and legal health check workshops over the last few years in partnership with some of the key stakeholders that we've been working with, like Rethink Ireland, like Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, like the Irish Social Enterprise Network, and they've been fantastic partners to help us connect with really great social enterprises on the ground in Ireland. These workshops have helped social enterprises see what legal issues that they might want to consider and how to get follow-on legal advice tailored for their organisation. We have also this year, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, organised a series of webinars focusing on some of the core legal issues which organisations have been facing, like clauses in relation to contracts. Maybe you hired a venue for a conference that you were planning, and due to the pandemic that event got cancelled, so you wanted to get a bit of advice perhaps on a force majeure clause. Likewise, employment law has been more important than ever, so trying to advise and guide organisations through some of the myriad of employment law issues relating perhaps to having to put people on furlough or you know, what kind of clauses are in their employment contracts to make sure that you're fully aware of your obligations as an employer. And lastly, we organised a session on governance. So whether or not, depending on what type of entity your organisation is established as, the COVID-19 pandemic had obviously impacted on people's ability to abide by some of their governance principles. So really just taking people through their organisation's obligations and rights and responsibilities and helping to reassure them what approaches they could take in light of this pandemic. We ran a series of those webinars earlier this year in March, and we're actually running another webinar taking place in next week during Pro Bono Week Ireland, and I can provide further details on that, but it is going to be a free webinar which will look at some of the latest issues relating to the COVID-19 pandemic and legal issues that organisations might want to think about, including data protection and employment rights. So I will be sure to share some information about that in case anyone on the line is interested to attend that. Speaking of Pro Bono Week, last year Trustlaw was part of the first ever Pro Bono Week Ireland. It was a fantastic initiative which brought together non-profits, charities, social enterprises and importantly lawyers to raise awareness about the pro bono work that's going on in Ireland and to really try and encourage more pro bono work to be happening. So again, as I mentioned, that's happening next week, so keep an eye out for some of the events that will be taking place virtually across Dublin. We were delighted last year to see the Irish government launch the National Social Enterprise Strategy. In that strategy, it was recognised that there was a need for discussion as to whether a separate legal entity might be needed for social enterprises. From our conversations over the years with the likes of Rethink Ireland, Irish Social Enterprise Network and others, it has seemed like there is a need for a simple guide on the legal structures that are currently available for social enterprises in Ireland. This fitted in really nicely with the series of social enterprise legal structuring guides that Trustlaw has been developing over the years across the globe. And so conversations started a couple of years ago about pulling together this now published social enterprise structuring guide. We got in touch with the lawyers at Mason Hayes & Curran, who have a really strong charity and not-for-profit law practice, and they kindly agreed to provide their pro bono legal services to develop this guide with Trustlaw. We've been working hard on the guide over the last number of months, and hopefully the people attending today will find it useful.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a very informative presentation, and no doubt the information that you've shared, not least on the legal forum guide, but indeed on the pro bono legal assistance that Trustlaw provides, may well be of real and maybe even immediate value to social enterprises participating in our event today. From our perspective at the ERCD, this has been a really superb collaboration, and we really want to thank you sincerely for it. A collaboration between the state and the non-governmental sector. We additionally have committed, and we are currently now translating that guide that you've produced into the Irish language to ensure that it's fully available and accessible to all our Irish-speaking regions and indeed to the development agencies such as Údarás na Gaeltachta, any of the local development companies and so on that are operating primarily through the Irish language. So that will be made available on the department's website. Additionally, building on what Sarah mentioned about the issue of the legal, bespoke legal status, I should also like to inform you that the ERCD, along with Rethink Ireland, has now commissioned a piece of research to determine the challenges facing social enterprises and to try to see whether those challenges are related to a legal form or related to the issues associated with administrative or other access or financing issues and so on. A survey is currently active and underway, and I think the link has been circulated in the chat box. I'd encourage you to take part in that and share your experience, and in particular to be as explicit as you can about the challenges so that we can determine the best course of action, which, as I say, may or may not be a legal form. So moving swiftly along with an eye on the clock, the next element of our program is going to be really interesting again. It's a roundtable discussion on the theme of today's conference, which is Shaping a Sustainable Inclusive Recovery. And it's with some of the most influential and inspirational people in the social enterprise sector in this country. Siobhan Cafferty, Mary Fogarty and Helen Nolan. For those of you who don't know them, Siobhan Cafferty is the Social Enterprise Project Manager working with the Irish Prison and Probation Service, having developed the first social enterprise strategy for the Department of Justice and Equality, a new way forward social enterprise strategy 2017 to 2019. Siobhan is preparing for the launch of the second expanded strategy called Working to Change, and that will be launched tomorrow. And it's no accident that it's happening this week because we are working very closely together. She's dedicated to improving the infrastructure to support social enterprises within the criminal justice sector in Ireland, and she is really a key friend and partner of the department. So Siobhan, you're very welcome. Turning next, Mary Fogarty is a co-founder of a Lockmore Community Cooperative, which is trading as the Cottage Shop and Tea Rooms in Lockmore. This is an award-winning social enterprise tea rooms that was set up in 2012 to combat rural isolation and lack of services in Lockmore. Mary is passionate about the project, helping many other communities throughout the country to replicate a similar kind of model in their communities. It's been deemed to be one of the most important social enterprises to emanate from Ireland in the past 20 years. And this is something I was witness to not too long ago at a British-Irish Council event in Birmingham, at which Mary really stole the show. And then last but certainly not least, in terms of introductions, Helen Nolan. Helen is a co-founder and CEO of Spree Agus Sport in Carndonagh, County Donegal. It's an award-winning social enterprise. Helen is passionate about community, and she's brought her business expertise, her professional expertise and life experiences to building and developing this very successful and innovative Spree Agus Sport social enterprise. Spree Agus Sport won the Social Enterprise of the Year Award in 2019 and is shortlisted again this year. You're all really very welcome this morning, and I'm so thankful to you all for taking the time to be with us. You might turn your cameras on and your microphones if you haven't already done so. I might start this conversation, but sorry, before I start, I just maybe mention that we hopefully will have time for a few questions. So I'd encourage those who are viewing to pop your questions as brief as you can into the chat box, and we'll see if we can get to them. I'll do my very, very best. Mary, I might start with yourself if you don't mind. And maybe just to kick us off, would you tell us briefly, why did Lockmore Cottage set up as a social enterprise? And I mean, why do you think that model could or should be replicated elsewhere?
Hi Andrew, good morning, and thank you very much for the invite to be on the panel. I'm really honoured, really very honoured indeed. We set up the Cottage Shop and Tea Rooms in Lockmore as a social enterprise because we absolutely loved the concept of people coming together to do something for the betterment of their community. We set it up as a community cooperative, which afforded people the opportunity to become shareholders in the co-op, and about 90% of our parishioners took up the offer, which shows you how much they thought of it and how much it was needed. We were struggling with rural isolation and the lack of services in our community. But, you know, it has super exceeded all our expectations since we opened, you know, creating employment and the opportunity for local people to sell their produce. And it embraces everybody in the community, from the youngest to the oldest. You know, so like its success, we're astounded at its success, but it's a bottoms-up approach to everything. It's about ordinary people doing ordinary things in their community and building on the strengths of the community. So, like we have, as it said, helped so many people in other communities in Ireland to replicate what we've done, and they're all trading successfully, which is huge. And the success of a social enterprise is so important because it binds everybody together and it adds meaningful life to a community. So we have been offered also the opportunity to showcase what we do throughout Europe. Last year I was in Hungary and Slovenia, and it was amazing. I just loved to see the other countries, what they were doing, and we're all the same all over the world. So what we do in Lockmore can actually be done anywhere.
And Mary, could I just, sorry to interrupt you, can I just ask you a question there? You mentioned the community cooperative, and I think that's a very important point just to make, you know, that there are obviously cooperatives in this country have a very long history, you know, and maybe predominantly in the public eye are seen as largely, you know, to do with agricultural cooperatives and so on. But we obviously know that it goes far, far beyond that. Have you seen that particular model of the community cooperative being taken up more around the country by people who've been interested in Lockmore? Do you think that that's an interesting model for others to follow?
Oh, it definitely is. We have had 12 other communities to set up community cooperatives throughout Ireland, and it's so small. The scale is so small. It's nothing like the big cooperatives, and people are just so happy to have ownership. The cooperative offers you the opportunity to own the business, and people are quite proud of what they're doing in their communities. So it's an ideal model to set up, you know, and there's nobody alone. It's very difficult to set up an enterprise if you're alone, but the cooperative, you know, helps. There's so many people there to help you. You have to have so many members on the board, and nobody's alone in it, which is a huge benefit. Huge benefit.
And I think that was something that Antonella Noya referred to earlier, is around that the collectivity actually builds in a certain resilience. And data that the OECD has shown that those kinds of organisations have been more resilient through the previous crash. Can I ask you, Mary, because you are obviously a rural-based social enterprise, and there are definitely characteristics of rural social enterprise that are different maybe from the more urban-based ones. What are your thoughts around the importance of social enterprises in rural areas, and specifically in terms of the recovery? What do you think is the opportunities afforded by social enterprises in rural areas?
Well, I think social enterprise is actually key to the success of our future in communities, in rural communities. It's the glue that binds people together to come together to do something. If COVID has taught us anything, it has taught us that how much we need people and what our community means to us. And it just has drawn on the strengths of the community. And I actually see COVID as being a huge benefit to social enterprise, because people now are actually realising how much they need each other. And if you've got a community coming together, you can't have anything better. You just cannot have anything better. They draw on their own strengths, and they know what their community needs. And they just bring the community in together in a way that you just couldn't describe it. I think if I was here for a week, I couldn't adequately express to you the benefits of having a social enterprise in any community.
And Mary, no doubt over the years you've been through the thick of it. You've faced many challenges, no doubt. What advice would you give for anyone who is listening in this morning, is in a rural area, maybe sees a problem or an opportunity? What advice would you give to them to set up, if they're considering to set up a social enterprise in a rural area?
I would say 100% go for it. Absolutely go for it. There's very, very little that can go wrong, because if you come together with other people have different skills. You may not have all the skills. You might have the idea, but you may not have all the skills to bring it together, but others will. And there's so much help out there. There really is. And with Leader and with all the different the county councils everywhere, and even having the department now, it's lovely to hear Heather Humphreys speak this morning, and her excitement about social enterprise and about getting behind us and bringing it forward. It's really an exciting time in Ireland for social enterprise, and there's so much help out there that all you have to do is reach out, and if you reach out, you will get back so much. And that's what my advice would be to people. Just reach out to all the establishments that are out there and find out what's available, and it'll all come back to you.
That's great, Mary. And indeed, we've seen there are many very active organisations in the country in terms of supporting social enterprise, and more emerging. And the more the merrier, I mean, when it comes to giving support to social enterprise. I'd like to move on to Helen briefly, but I'll come back to you, no doubt, Mary, with a further question. Thanks for that. Helen, since it was established 10 years ago, I think it's your birthday actually, isn't it? It's Spree Agus Sports' birthday. Since it was established 10 years ago, can you just tell us how has Spree Agus Sports sought to address the local needs in Tarrandona and Donegal?
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Yes, Spree Agus Sports opened its doors to the public for the first time 10 years ago there Tuesday. And it was set up to address the lack of services for stay-at-home mums and their children in Carndonagh here in Donegal. I was one of those stay-at-home mums. Myself and 4 of my friends got together and, decided that we need to do something about it. And from the very beginning, our business model has always been about responding to the needs of the community. So in the beginning, we provided 3 parent and toddler groups every week, catering for about 20 children. And as the days and weeks went on, more and more people from the community started using our service and fed into it, and we developed them from there. So we started introducing programs like Couch to 5K in response to a need for well-being and exercise initiatives. We also introduced after-school clubs, holiday camps, schools of music, evening classes for adults, and all the time, it was about delivering in terms of social impact around, improved mental health, and reducing isolation within our community. And I remember it was shortly after we had opened 10 years ago, 2 parents came to me. They both had children with disability, and they have used to report to make sure that our children are in this. So we have taken that with us from them. And I suppose one of the big things we've done, in relation to services not being, recreational services not being available for children and teenagers with disability, is that we have made sure that everything that we do within the services that we provide, that they are, as far as they can, inclusive. So we provide a special needs assistance, so a child or teenager with a disability can attend, an after-school club or an IT class in the same way as their peers. And then back in 2012, then along with CNAO, and later 2 years ago, along with the HSC at the REF Fund, we provide a model of care called alternative respite. And this is where, children and teenagers get to participate in recreational activity of their choice. And we provide support, and then the family gets avail of daytime respite. So today, 10 years later, is no different to when we started, all about responding to the needs of our community.
Yeah, fantastic, Helen, really, really fantastic to hear that broad offering and the response that you've put in place. Can I ask you more immediately though? I mean, because I presume in the last 10 years, the last year has been maybe one of the most tumultuous of all of the years. How have you adapted and innovated specifically in light of the COVID-19 crisis, Helen?
Yes, so look, Sprigo Sport's all about connecting people. We were providing 60 activities a week to over 700 people, and then all of a sudden on the 12th of March, all of that stopped. All our services had to be, suspended. So we regrouped that weekend, and what we do, how we respond. We linked into our community, and within days, Andrew, we were able to totally pivot our business model, and we began Project Kennel. So through this project, we provided a helpline 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. to coordinate grocery deliveries, prescription deliveries, collections. And to date, we've answered 898 calls. Along with the Inishowen Development Partnership and a number of other charities in Inishowen, we set up the Inishowen Food Bank, and that was a first for this part of the country. So we're still delivering weekly packs, today. We brought some of our activities online. We started delivering online classes for children and adults. And then we were very fortunate that Dormant Accounts provided funding for a fabrication laboratory in our centre. So we were able to produce visors in the beginning. So we produced over 1,000 visors for frontline staff and for businesses going back to work. Today we're actually making masks. We have the TY students from the local community school making masks for the pupils there. And then I suppose, I had mentioned previously just about our children, with a disability. So the big thing for us was, how are we going to cater for them? Because, they didn't understand, I guess, what was happening. So we thought, everybody else is on Zoom. We're going to try Zoom here too. And we did. And you know what? It worked. They loved it. We provided a short session every single day during the week. And it gave a bit of focus and a bit of purpose. And we were lucky that we could reintroduce face-to-face alternative by towards the end of May. So, we're doing a hybrid model now. We have some face-to-face and we're still continuing Zoom. We have a Zoom bingo every Wednesday, which we really, really enjoy. We have some extra space within our facility, so we offered some co-working space as well for anybody that needed it, that had to obviously work remotely, but perhaps, their broadband wasn't as good as it could be. And then through a Healthy Ireland Donegal County Council initiative, then we were able to provide some mental health support too, especially for those children in 6th class, because I really felt that they had missed out on a lot, trying to, prepare them for their transition into secondary school in September. So yeah, very busy, very, very different, So then we obviously had to look at our traded income, which collapsed. We had a charity shop, the dough, as part of our business model. So we partnered up with Thriftify, another fantastic social enterprise. We got our TY students from Carndonna Community School on board, and they have put, I think, almost 800 items up online. So I don't think, we said we're never going to be caught out again where we have no money coming in. So so it's been great. Lots of lessons learned. Fabulous team behind the whole setup. Everybody just worked so hard and continuing to do so today.
God, Helen, inspirational stuff. I'm exhausted listening to all the you're involved with, but it's really just an example though of how innovative and how committed social enterprises are to fulfilling their mission, just even against all the odds. I might just ask you one last thing briefly, and I've got an eye on the time here, and I don't want to tighten things too much, but I also think it's an important moment for us to reflect on where we can do better, Helen, in terms of state supports or other supports. And what are your thoughts, around how do we really unlock the full potential of social enterprise in this country? What needs to be done as part of the recovery in particular?
Yeah, no, and Andrew, look, and a lot of it was touched on earlier, both by the Minister herself and then with Sean too. We need to build awareness. People need to be aware that they're actually in a social enterprise. The community needs to be aware of what social enterprise means and the value that they can bring. We need to, and I think John alluded to it, and that's why I think it's great that we have a lot of the TY students, from the community school involved with us. We need to teach young people about social entrepreneurship. We need to be able to, when we're advertising jobs, that, people will consider a social enterprise in the same way as they will a private sector job or a public sector. That this job, we need to be able to, attract and, retain high talent people. And I suppose then, on another level too, a lot of people setting up these, we all bring different skills to our enterprises, but, we probably need a little bit of support, not a little bit, probably a lot of support in terms maybe of strategic planning, financial planning, how to write a grant application, marketing, PR, communications, all those types of things as well, so that we, as social enterprises can get our message out in the best way that we can. But, we do need the support, and that's why the likes, the stability funds, the wage subsidy scheme, all of those things were just obviously vital during COVID. So, and I guess too, it would be great if there was, one source for social enterprises to go to, because if you're registered as a charity as well, you can't go to, you can't access maybe supports through the Leo. But in terms of us here in Donegal, we're lucky, Donegal County Council is very supportive of the work that we do as this initial development partnership. So, we're lucky there, and I suppose it's just that would be replicated throughout the country as well.
That's great, Helen. Thanks so much for your insights. Really very, very valuable for everybody listening in. Siobhan, I'll turn to you now for a moment, because you really have a unique experience and expertise when it comes to all things related to inclusion and work integration and so on. In your opinion, how can social enterprises help to ensure that the recovery really is a sustainable and an inclusive one?
Andrew, good morning. Thank you for having me, and I suppose just congratulations on an amazing morning. It's like my head has been like a nodding dog with absolutely everybody who's been saying all of these really key points, and in particular Helen and Mary, and how do I follow that? But I suppose in a way, in terms of a recovery, you said at the beginning, Andrew, do we want to go back to where we were, or do we want to see it as pressing reset? And I think definitely from my point of view, I think that COVID has rocked us to our core in all sectors. However, I think from the social enterprise side of things, social enterprises have almost been like the rapid response team. they've kind of picked up, they've I suppose excelled, and it has been challenging. It's been hugely challenging. However, I suppose when I think about the responses to COVID this year and all those key messages like stronger together, leave no one behind, buy social, they're things that the social enterprise sector have been doing for decades, not just in response to COVID. So I think in a way, social enterprises have been and are the backbone to Irish society. They're the organisations, the businesses that are inclusive and that have been, I suppose, leading out on that for many, many years. So I think what I would say, and this is where I suppose Antonella's piece, and I think maybe it might be the theme for a future conference, or definitely something around social enterprise from the margins to the mainstream. I think what I would say in terms of social enterprise is what they can do and what now is an opportunity to do it. And Mary and Helen's pieces have really said that. Now is our time to shine. Now is our time to come from being the backbone, being in behind the scenes, doing incredible stuff, to now shine and come into the mainstream. And I think what's been really useful over the past little while, if you think of, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, Frontline Bikes, for example, in Inchicore were featured on our 6-1 news. Our main national news in the middle of a crisis, they were featured on it. We had social enterprises, We Make Good, Carja Enterprises, a number of others featured on the Late Late Show. It's starting to become into the mainstream. And I think that, what we can do is around visibility. The language this morning has been around partnership and collaboration. That's all essential. And I think, as I said, for me, how we can influence the future, it's be role models and continue doing what we're doing. Be role models, but we need to be more visible. And I think it's really good that your department, Andrew, and Minister Humphreys said it this morning around the awareness campaign. Now's our time where we really need to hit that, and we need to get out there and be seen for the work that we've been doing.
Siobhan, can I ask you, because of course there is still some concern, I think, that that there's a dichotomy between having a social mission and being a trading entity of some sort. Like, do you think that a dichotomy is real, or should we? How can we move on from that if it's not?
I think there is an uneasiness there, Andrew, to be honest with you. And I think, in my mind, and the way I can kind of rationalize this is, social enterprise activity takes place on a spectrum. We've got those who are the deficient-led services who are providing much needed support to their local communities. Those who are doing the Meals on Wheels, My Mind, for example, 4,000 calls in a month. It's like, they're incredible services, and that's really, really essential. And then on the other end of the spectrum is those that are a little bit more commercially minded in terms of the traded income. They rely more closely on having to bring in an income in order for their services to be provided. And it shouldn't be an either or. However, I think, from my personal experience, I come from the community and voluntary sector, where we had to put in and we had to write funding grants every single year. And my God, you spent every single penny of that because you needed to spend it to be able to support the people that you're working with. Otherwise, it went back. And I think sometimes that the mindset can be a little bit stuck on that a bit. But now that, I'm more in the social enterprise side of things, I don't think that we should be afraid of the word profit. In fact, we should embrace it. And I think that, the way I see it, and I obviously come from the criminal justice sector side of things now, and the way I see profit for social enterprises is when a social enterprise has profit and has increased their traded income, what does that equate to the people that they're set up for their social mission? And in the case of the criminal justice sector, that means that they could potentially have another position, another job. And as John Evoy said earlier on, not entry-level jobs, real employment. And that means that someone who has a criminal record, who is trying to integrate back into society, who's trying to leave their past behind, and is trying to move on, will potentially get a job. And social enterprises have played a huge role in that, not just for those with a criminal record, members of the traveller community, people with disabilities, or those just marginalised for a whole range of different reasons. So I think actually rather than shy away from the word profit, we need to embrace it, and actually we need to strive to reach it more and more.
Thanks, Siobhan. And I think, just from the point of view of policy, we made it very clear that that spectrum is real, and deficient demand organisations are as legitimate and as important a social enterprise as the opposite end of the scale. Yeah. But the question, I guess, is to have the correct supports at the right levels, and then to seize the opportunity for social enterprises to grow. Can I ask you one final question, Siobhan, briefly, if I may? What more should the government, public authorities and society be doing to develop and seize the potential of social enterprise, do you think?
Oh my God, there's so much, Andrew, but I'll probably get on my soapbox that anybody who's heard me over the past little while will know that I talk about social procurement a lot. And I talk about how, social enterprises need a hand up, not necessarily a handout all of the time. And I think the whole theme of this morning has been about that. It's just like we want to be able to do more. We want to be able to scale up. We want to be able to replicate, as Helen was talking about earlier, or Mary was talking about earlier on. So I think for me, the message that I would be given to government departments and public bodies is to spend wisely and really think about your purchasing power. And I think then for social enterprises, it's very much around looking at where you can bring in your traded income. And that could definitely be through looking at public contracts. And I suppose in that regard, I'll just do a bit of a plug, from your department and the Department of Justice and Pobal. Next week we'll be rolling out the beginning of a procurement training series for social enterprises so they can familiarise themselves with the likes of e-tenders and how they can write a competitive bid and compete for those type of contracts. But again, coming back to those who have the money, what I would be saying to government departments and public bodies is, as I said, spend wisely and think that every euro that you're spending on behalf of us as the people of Ireland, it really needs to have that additionality and that added value piece, and that means that having a social clause in a contract, whether it's an environmental climate action clause and or a social clause, that is going to play a huge role for the social enterprises in particular that could compete for that. And what I would also say is to think about the lower threshold, the lower tariff contracts, those below the 25 grand procurement threshold. If a social enterprise, and maybe throw this one back to Helen and Mary, if a social enterprise was able to get a contract for 20 grand, that would be phenomenal. And the impact on that, on the people and their communities that they are serving, would be huge. So for those in the procurement units, in any government department, I would say when you're looking at putting out a contract or looking at those lower threshold ones, I would be saying, ask yourselves, can a social enterprise put in for this? Are there social enterprises that are available? We need to be available. We need to be visible. Buysocial.ie is something where social enterprises can go without being visible, without those procurers knowing where those social enterprises are. We're missing a trick here. So yeah, that's what I would say, that definitely the social procurement side is the way forward.
That's really useful, Siobhan. And in ways, the socially responsible public procurement almost should be the reflex, and
it should be
to follow.
And I actually think, just Andrew, just to finish on that with that piece, that's the piece that COVID has brought to us. Out of every challenge comes opportunity, and I think that in my experience of the past few months is that government departments, public bodies are seeing that they have a responsibility to introduce socially responsible public procurement. And I think, as I said, COVID is about pressing reset and allowing us to have a brighter, more sustainable, inclusive future rather than going back to where we were.
Brilliant, Siobhan. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask just one question. I've factored in several of the comments that have come in the comment box into the questions to the speakers so far, but there's one that I think is left not sufficiently addressed that I might just throw back to Mary and Helen. And it relates to the local enterprise offices, because there was a couple of questions in there around what the experience has been in terms of accessing local enterprise office support. I don't know, Mary or Helen, do either of you have any thoughts on that particular issue?
Well, I know, Andrew, we struggle because we're a registered charity as well. So we have, that we can't access the trading online voucher, although we were able to access the first voucher that came out at the start of COVID. But the general rule of thumb, we would tend to veer towards our partnership voucher funding and the like.
And Mary, what's your experience been?
We've had a really good experience with the local enterprise office. Anything that they can see that we can avail of, they offer it to us. Let it be training for young volunteers in, food safety, handling, or whatever training opportunity comes up. They always include us. And it's, you know, whether we can avail of it or not, then, you know, it's up to ourselves. We've had a really, really good experience with them, but we don't trade online, so it doesn't apply to us. A lot of the things don't apply to us that Leo would be offering, but when they have something, they will definitely come to us and we can do it.
Thanks a million. And maybe that's reflective of the national experience. It's a mixed bag, depending potentially on circumstances on the ground and relationships or whatever. But certainly from our point of view, social enterprises are businesses, and hence they should have, we feel, access to the mainstream business supports. But look, the time has really run on. We could keep going for a long time more, but I'm going to actually have to bring this conversation to an abrupt end. But I just want to thank Mary, Helen and Siobhan for that really incredibly insightful conversation discussion. There's so much left to say, but I think what you've shared is going to be incredibly valuable for social enterprises on this call today. I'm very much thankful to all of you for it.
Thank you.
So I think that brings me to the last, and apologies, we're running 5 minutes over, but I hope you'll forgive me for that. I think it's been worth taking that extra 5 minutes or so. We're down to our very last element, or penultimate element of the agenda, and that is to invite the Secretary General of the Department for Rural and Community Development, Mr. Kevin McCarthy, to give us some observations and concluding remarks for the event. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Andrew, and I'm conscious that I'm in injury time at this stage, so I'll try to be succinct. I just first of all want to thank everybody for their participation, and just to say it's been a really brilliant event, really hugely uplifting, and I would say inspiring actually to listen to all of the contributions this morning. I'm actually surrounded by notes that I've been taking, but I'll resist the temptation to work my way comprehensively through them. Just maybe touch on a few observations that arise for me. Like, first of all, it is great that so many people have come together this morning, albeit remotely, because these national conferences, annual conferences, they're a commitment in the policy, but this is about much more than fulfilling that commitment. It really is an opportunity to try to maintain the momentum and the visibility that's now been generated behind the policy more than a year on from its publication, and there's been a lot of important milestones already achieved. But it's also about widening and deepening awareness, and that word and that imperative for developing awareness of the role of social enterprise has been referenced a good number of times already this morning, and it really is a really important challenge for all of us. And of course, looking to the future, the theme of the conference also reflects that really important opportunity and potential that's there now for social enterprise to help us to shape a recovery that's sustainable and inclusive. So just to remind people of what the Minister said earlier, I would certainly want to join in what she had to say about the role that social enterprises have been playing in Ireland's response to the COVID pandemic. I mean, that's been witnessed and experienced in every community right across the country. And I'd also just join her in acknowledging the extremely difficult and challenging times that social enterprises have faced over the past number of months. And just again to stress that as a department working across government, we're continuing to do all we can to support social enterprise through those challenges. And there's been a good number of references to the supports and indeed the access to business supports, and Andrew's latter point there in relation to the uneven nature of Leo supports, for example, is just an illustration, I think, of some of the challenge that we need to work through across government in trying to support you to do what you're doing. And it is important that social enterprises are recognised as trading businesses that have access to that full range of commercial supports and enterprise supports that are available more generally. I would also just in referencing the awareness challenge, just remind you of that challenge that the Minister set down for the audience, which was to ask each of you to think about how you can support the awareness effort. And one practical thing that I think people can do is to self-identify as social enterprises. And to proudly and confidently describe yourselves as social enterprises, because the diversity of the sector is one of its strengths, but it also can lead to a bit of a dilution of recognition of what social enterprise is, and it is important that people do reinforce that message. look, we've had some great contributions from each of the speakers this morning, and I won't attempt to, and I wouldn't be capable of doing justice to what they've said, but it was great to hear John's reflections as somebody who's worked in a variety of roles in the social enterprise, to hear his reflections on the changes in the landscape and the need for us to be ambitious for the sector and look into the future. You know, the resilience of employment in the sector as part of the ethos is really a really important message, and the need for us collectively to be able to communicate the quality of employment and quality of career opportunities in the sector. I think he left us with some really important points, I think, to think about in terms of how we can do that. It was great also to hear that international perspective from Antonella. And great to hear about the work that the OECD is doing in looking at the role of social enterprise in the post-COVID era, and it's certainly important that we as a department will continue to connect with that work, and we will certainly be determined to do that. And it was also great to hear of the great work that Sarah Farley was describing in relation to both the new legal form guide for Ireland, which was launched today, and also the really valuable and commendable and hopefully really practical support that they're providing through their pro bono services, and it's really, as I say, to be commended. So look, as I say, I'm not going to attempt to go through everything. The roundtable discussion, again, just really uplifting, and just, you know, to hear about the motivation behind the establishment of a social enterprise like the one in Lockmore, the potential of the community cooperative model, you know, that language about communities coming together, identifying a need within a community and meeting that need, and, you know, what Mary described there in terms of the intangible benefits that the community has felt, which go beyond any measure, really. And I think, you know, the collaboration and the partnership locally that we heard about through the Spree Agus Sport, you know, is really instructive and illustrative, I think, of the partnerships and collaboration that we see among social enterprise stakeholders more generally. And it's really important in the implementation of the policy more widely that we take that approach, and that we continue to invest the time and the effort and the energy in fostering those partnerships and that collaboration, because when all social enterprises succeed, we all benefit. And that's very clear from the impact that social enterprises are having at community level, the locally rooted nature of them, the potential that's there. And, you know, Siobhan again talked to think about that visibility challenge, and I think her challenge again to government departments in terms of both her advice to government departments, but also setting out some of the challenges for us in terms of procurement and so on, is valuable to remind ourselves of and to reflect on. So look, I think in fact it was Siobhan that picked up on earlier references to social enterprise moving from the margins to the mainstream, and I think that's a catchphrase that we should think about taking away from today. You know, something else that the Minister mentioned earlier on was that 2021 will be the year of the recovery, and the theme of the conference reflects that. And it's really vital now that social enterprise support and growth is at the heart of a sustainable and inclusive recovery, and that's the challenge we have. We have a policy framework in place. We have the will. I think we have the collective capacity across the sector. I think the imagination, the innovation, the enterprise, you know, all of those things that we've heard about this morning, social enterprise, filling gaps, meeting needs at community level, delivering services, experimenting and innovating in ways that public services don't often, or don't always anyway, have the capacity to do. So social enterprise really has to be at the heart of a recovery, and our job now collectively, and our job within government, is to make sure that that happens. You heard the Minister's statement of ambition for the sector again this morning, that Ireland would be a global leader in this space, and that's where we want to be. I'm just delighted that so many of you have demonstrated by your participation here this morning that you're committed to travelling that road with us, and we're committed to working with you on it. So look, I just want to thank Andrew, William, Richard, John, Ida, all of the team in DRCD for all of the work that's gone into this event, and for the wider programme of activity that they've been delivering on, which most of you are very familiar with, because I think it is visible, it is having an impact, and we want to generate and keep that momentum. So look, just thanks once again to all of you for taking part. As I say, it's been a hugely uplifting event, and I'm very conscious of time, Andrew, so I'll hand back to you at this point.
Sorry, Kevin, I wasn't trying to rush you off by any means.
That's okay.
Thanks very much, Kevin, for that really comprehensive summation, and also, again, uplifting remarks from yourself. Really much appreciated. So what's only left to do is really to thank everybody. Thanks to all our fantastic speakers, and to all of the social enterprises who were showcased today. Really, it's all about you, and that's the purpose of this. It's to have that conversation, share those learnings. We're really grateful for that. Thanks, obviously, to my team who've been working extremely hard behind the scenes today to make it happen. As I said last year, I don't want the momentum to stop here. So please continue to engage with us, work with us, feedback to us, keep that feedback loop constant. And as Kevin rightly said, be the champions of social enterprise. Be proud of that diversity of the sector. I mean, that breadth and that diversity is the sector's strength. And your voices and your experience are what really matter most. So look, keep up the excellent work. We're committed to doing the part we can to help you to get through this pandemic with a stronger, a more inclusive, and a more sustainable society. So thank you all, and happy International Social Enterprise Day.